Thanks very much for staying with us. Time now for Eye on Africa with me, Georgia Calvin-Smith. Tonight, a new deal paves the way for the development of the first African-owned Covid-19 vaccines. Town-based Afrigen is working with a Belgian biotech company to develop mRNA shots. Also, Kenya said that bringing down rocketing teen pregnancy figures is a priority. The country has no reproductive health legislation, but the public is going to give its input on a regional bill that could make a big difference to sexual health services if it's adopted. And the refugee status of hundreds of thousands of Ivorians who fled post-electoral violence in the country in 2011 comes to an end later this month. Refugee camps in neighbouring countries are being closed as host nations ramp up voluntary repatriation programmes. But first, Africa will soon produce its own Covid-19 vaccines in South Africa. This comes after the World Trade Organization agreed to relax intellectual property restrictions on Covid-19 vaccines, a big win for the continent, which still overwhelmingly relies on imported shots. But some say that the changes still don't go far enough. Nadine Therar with more.
South Africa's Afrigen and Belgium's Universal Group are producing Africa's first COVID-19 vaccine in Cape Town, using the hub set up by the World Health Organization to transfer mRNA technologies. In February, Afrigen reproduced Moderna's COVID-19 vaccine without help from the pharmaceutical giant. It will now be extending production to 15 sites in low and middle income countries. In another big development, the World Trade Organization agreed to patent waivers for developing countries. For 5 years, they'll be able to manufacture and export patented vaccines without permission from the patent holders. South Africa and India have been battling for a full intellectual property waiver for 2 years. But that's been rejected, and some say the World Trade Organization's compromise is flawed.
It excludes very critical intellectual property like trade secrets and data protection, which wouldn't have much of an impact if we look at vaccine manufacturers in the country. And if we're going to look at the case of the mRNA hub, who might be confronted with patent issues, from Moderna because they are replicating the Moderna vaccine. This particular TRIPS waiver doesn't necessarily assist them with the current patent challenge that they, that might potentially block them from putting the vaccine in the market.
Last year, US giant Johnson & Johnson allowed South Africa's Aspen Pharmacare to produce a local COVID-19 vaccine, but due to a lack of demand, its facilities now face closure. The Ministry of Trade, Industry and Competition says it's pushing to get more international orders for African-made vaccines.
Well, South Africa's main opposition party is saying that it's asked the US's FBI to investigate allegations of money laundering levelled at President Cyril Ramaphosa. He's denied claims that he covered up a 2020 break-in at his farmhouse in Limpopo, in which $4 million in cash was stolen. He says the money was from the sale of livestock and that he did report the burglary. But the Democratic Alliance wants a closer look at where the money came from and to see whether it was declared to tax authorities. At least 5 people, including 4 children, have died in heavy flooding in Abidjan in Ivory Coast. Dozens had to be rescued after torrential rains fell overnight into Tuesday. Some parts of the city saw 200 millilitres, the equivalent of several weeks of rain, in just a few hours. Last week, 6 people died after torrential rain triggered a landslide in the city's western neighbourhood of Mosikro. And Kenya still has no national reproductive health legislation, a particularly worrying absence in light of skyrocketing teen pregnancy figures. From June 26th, though, the public will be able to weigh in on a sexual and reproductive health rights bill that could make a big difference to services available to women. But it's been 5 years since it was first introduced and is yet to be passed. Our correspondent, Vivian Wandera, spoke to one sexual health campaigner who says the country can't afford not to adopt it.
In Kenya, 45,000 teenage pregnancies were reported in a 5-month period. And that's, if we translate this, it's approximately 700 adolescent girls getting pregnant every single day. This bill seeks to push these numbers down because it provides a framework where teenagers and adolescents are able to get correct information so that they're making responsible choices. The bill also talks about ending gender-based violence, and if you look at the figures, there's a report that showed that Eastern and Southern Africa have the highest rates of gender-based violence across the whole continent, and this bill seeks to put down those numbers. It seeks to end FGM, it seeks to end forced marriage, it also provides a framework for men and boys' sexual and reproductive health rights. And it's important in terms of public participation for people to understand exactly what it is and to put in their memoranda to the Legislative Assembly, just so that they can then go to Parliament and make an informed decision because they represent the people.
So 5 years since the first reading of the bill in 2017, it has not yet been passed. What exactly has caused this stalemate to date?
A lot of countries are patriarchal, right? Women are meant to be seen and not heard. And when we talk about issues of sexual and reproductive health, it seems to be a women's and a girl's issue. But there's also the issue of Western funded organizations that are really interfering and pushing the agenda. So we're seeing a lot of opposition that's being funded by, for example, Citizen Go, who have really been front and center in trying to negate the gains that are being made. And so we see them interfering in issues of Africa, yet it's so important for Africa to decide what they want for Africa. So this is a proposed law by Africans for Africans.
So what happens next after the public participation? Are we going to see this bill finally getting the chance it deserves?
This bill provides hope because there is a framework on monitoring and reporting. So every 2 years, each government must provide a status report to the Secretary General of the EAC. And because of how it operates, how things work at the East Africa community, is that one country can actually sue the other for non-compliance. In terms of will it pass, that's why we need people to understand what the bill talks about. Let's not have people just listen to opposition who don't even break down the issues and, term a bill like as an abortion bill or as giving teenagers, access to contraception so that they become promiscuous. No, let's engage with a bill. Let's decide, let's read it and decide what it is that we want.
Now, after a disputed election in Ivory Coast in 2010 broke out into fierce fighting, over 300,000 people fled to neighbouring countries. The return of stability to their homeland does mean that their refugee status will formally end on June 30th. Although many have already returned home, some are still uncertain of what they'll find if they go back. Samuel Bernard reports.
Reunited after 11 years, it's the second time Raphael is visiting his sister since returning home recently from Togo. For the two siblings, this is an opportunity to make up for lost time.
He came back safe and sound. He was in better shape at the time. But thank God he is alive and God will look after him.
Raphael had to leave Ivory Coast in 2011 because of his affiliation to former President Laurent Gbagbo. He says that once the political leader was able to come home in June 2021, he too started organizing his own return.
I went to the refugee camp. I gathered them and told them there is no more reason to be here to suffer.
A former policeman, Raphael is still waiting to regain his civil servant status as promised by the government. Authorities have also announced other measures to encourage refugees to return, cancellation of their unpaid taxes and recovery of all properties that were looted during the war. In total, more than 310,000 refugees have returned to the country since 2011.
As part of the reconciliation process, it was good that everyone returned because they did not want to leave. The reasons that pushed them into exile no longer exist, which is why we invoked the cessation of refugee status clause.
The termination of refugee status for Ivorians, which will be effective at the end of June, has not been well received by all. 13,000 Ivorians have chosen to stay abroad. This political opponent based in Ghana believes the government pledges aren't nearly enough.
I really want to go back to my country, as do many others. But we hope that the security conditions for some of us will be fixed, and the conditions for social reintegration too.
The government claims to have released all political prisoners in Ivory Coast this year. According to the opposition, about 100 are still waiting to be released.
And Senegalese football star Sadio Mané is leaving Premier League club Liverpool to join Bundesliga bulldozers Bayern Munich. The German team will pay more than 40 million euros for the transfer, and Mané's wages are thought to be more than €250,000 a week. In Senegal, Mané is a superstar. Many people there think that he was underappreciated at Liverpool and is making the right move. Sam Baptiste has been speaking with avid football fans on the streets of Dakar. Here's what they had to say.
Sadio Mané is one of the world's greatest living football players and undoubtedly one of the best African players of all time. Earlier this season, he helped his country, Senegal, win the African Cup of Nations. Back in 2019, he won the Champions League with Liverpool. But now he's leaving the club to go and play in Germany for Bayern Munich. Practically everyone we spoke to here on the streets of Dakar really backed their national hero in making the move.
It's a very good thing, since his contract with Liverpool is ended. And because Bayern is a very good team, I think it's a good choice.
Sadio Mané is a good footballer. He plays to win. He doesn't just play to score. He makes passes and puts in a lot of effort. I hope he will succeed there.
In Senegal, we wish him the very best. Truly, he deserves it. He is our pride. We wish him all the best in the world. He honestly deserves it.
Sadio Mané's legend status goes far beyond football here in Senegal. In recent years, he's invested close to €1 million, building a school, a hospital, a post office, and even a petrol station in the village where he grew up.
Ah, so much goodwill there. That is, though, all we have time for Eye on Africa. Thanks for joining us. Do so again. Take care. And